Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kate and today I'm going to be one of the last few who is still doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I don't like doing this until July, once we're fully through the first 6 months of the year. And I've also just been really slow at getting content up lately. This is not a new story for me. I am just a slacker. So I have 13 questions that I'm going to be going through that are basically sort of wrapping up how the first half of the year went for me in terms of reading. A ton of channels, like basically every booktube channel does this tag, so I'm sure you know how this goes. I'll just jump right into it. So the first question is best book you've read so far this year. And of course, I could not just pick one, but I will say in my defense that both of these books I read for the first time this year and also reread in the first half of the month. First half of the year. So very clearly all-time favorites for me. And honestly, I would reread them again today if I could somehow justify it. So that is A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. This is the first book in the Teix-Callan duology that Martine is really well known for. It is sort of a political space opera that follows an ambassador who gets sent to this giant empire and ends up getting involved in all kinds of machinations, basically. It's a great character study of Mahit, who's this very smart, very clever, but also out of her depth individual, and how she kind of learns to navigate the society that she's grown up loving, but is also threatening to her. And that dynamic is something I just absolutely love. I have tried to read the second book in this duology a couple of times, and I just haven't really had the brain space for it. It really expands on the world that's established in A Memory Called Empire, but it's less focused on Mahit, which is great for people who didn't enjoy her perspective as much in the first one, but for me it's a little more challenging. I don't just immediately love it quite as much. And the second one that I loved this year is no surprise, and that is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This is a sort of light academia story following a scholar, Emily Wilde, who ends up traveling to this sort of Scandinavian-esque island where she's investigating a new type of fairy and ends up getting some help from a colleague who she sort of has a rivalry with, but also he's one of her only friends. And so there's this great bantery dynamic between Emily and Wendell. And I just really love that it feels cozy, but it also has stakes and a threat to it in the form of the Fae, who aren't just sort of this sexy manifestation. They feel other, and they definitely are capable of killing or not taking humans seriously enough in terms of not accidentally killing them. So there's this sort of capriciousness that is something I really look for in Fae stories, and I really, really enjoyed it in this one. So those are definitely my two favorites of the year so far. The next question is the best sequel you've read so far. And for that, I honestly haven't read a ton of sequels this year, which is a bad sign because it means I'm not keeping up with my series. The easy winner out of the couple that I have read is The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. This is the second book in the Thursday Murder Club series, which is a sort of cozy mystery series following a group of senior citizens who end up getting wrapped up in murder investigations because they sort of view that as their hobby instead of doing puzzles or knitting or whatever other crafty things they might potentially have been doing. And I loved Thursday Murder Club and getting to know the different members of this little tight-knit group and seeing them work together to solve a murder and also be kind of conniving and take advantage of folks who dismiss them as just old people. But The Man Who Died Twice really expands on that. You get to see a lot more of the relationships between the different characters. There's a dynamic with one in particular who undergoes some trauma, and you really get to see him deal with that and sort of the effect it has on the relationships around him and how much his friends rally around him in that scenario. So I really loved that. The mystery was very twisty and fun, just like in Thursday Murder Club. So it took all of the fun of the first one and expanded on it and really was heartfelt in a way that I wasn't necessarily expecting. So highly recommend Thursday Murder Club series in general, but specifically if you liked the first one, definitely keep going. Question number 3 is new releases you haven't read yet but want to. And this list could be a mile long, honestly, but I have 3 that I've narrowed this down to that are books that I would really like to prioritize in the second half of the year. We'll see if I actually get to them, but I definitely want to get to them soon. The first one is Furious Heaven by Kate Elliott. This is the second book in her Sun Chronicles series, which is sort of, it's often called like a gender bent Alexander the Great in space, and it is definitely taking key moments from Alexander's life, but it is also doing so in a world that Kate Elliott has spent a lot of time and energy crafting. So it's not just like a straight up retelling of history. She's really brought in all of these elements and thought about how space flight would work with all of these different societies. And I really, really love the sort of blend of action plus historical detail that has really impressed me with this series. The main reason I have not gotten to it is it's like 800 pages. I don't have time for 800 pages or patience, honestly. I don't like books that are more than really 500. They really have to convince me to pick them up, and I just haven't gotten there with Furious Heaven yet. So I want to get to it, but I'm definitely intimidated by the size of it. The second book on my list is Lone Women by Victor LaValle. This is a sort of historical fiction plus sort of Lovecraftian horror, and I have really enjoyed Victor LaValle's Lovecraftian horror takes in the past with Ballad of Black Tom. This is following a young woman who ends up, I think she moves to Montana and has to homestead out there after the death of her parents, but she's bringing along this chest that she has to keep with her, but she definitely needs to never open. So it's a very interesting premise to me. I just haven't made space for this in my TBR with a bunch of other reads. Like usually buddy reads end up edging this one out, but I would really like to get to it. And then the final book that I'm going to mention here for new releases I want to get to is Painted Devils by Margaret Owen. Another sequel. This is the sequel to Little Thieves, which is an amazing sort of heisty, German-inspired fantasy with a fairly flawed but very fun sasshole main character. So I definitely would recommend it. If you haven't read Little Thieves before, it's YA, but it's the realm of YA that works for me now as like a 36-year-old. I find that I have gotten more picky with the YA that I pick up now because I have a harder time identifying with younger characters now that I'm getting older myself. So I really, really enjoyed the main character in the first one. This one has sort of a cult twist as far as I understand it, and I'm just up for more Vanya. So I can't wait to dig into this one. I am really going to try to get to this one this month in July. If I don't, August for sure. Question number 4 is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And again, I have several for this. I will try and be quick on them. So Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher is one of them. I don't know anything about it other than that it's potentially a fairy tale retelling by Kingfisher, and that's basically all I needed to know to sign up for that. I adore T. Kingfisher, so definitely looking forward to that. And I think that one is a novella, if I remember right. The second one is The Water Outlaws by S.L. Huang. So all I know about Water Outlaws is that it's inspired by sort of a martial arts classic. It's a wuxia story that apparently has some Eat the Rich vibes, but follows two female bandits who end up potentially going up against much more powerful figures. Sounds super fun. This has been on my list literally since it got announced, because anytime you describe something as very heavily focused on martial arts, I'm pretty much immediately on board. So I can't wait to see where the author goes with this one. So definitely looking forward to that. And then the final one that I will talk about as an anticipated release is System Collapse by Martha Wells. This is the most recent Murderbot. I believe it's going to be a full-length novel, and frankly, anything Murderbot signed me up for. This has been on my list again since they announced it, so I cannot wait for that to come out. I will definitely be doing audiobook again just because I love that series on audio. So question number 5 is going to get a little bit ranty, but I'm going to attempt to hold myself back a little bit because I will have a longer review. I will have this particular book in a wrap-up, recent reads wrap-up that I will be doing shortly here, so keep an eye out for that. But the biggest disappointment by far for this year, and that's because this was probably my most anticipated book that I knew about other than maybe Murderbot for 2023 release, and that is unfortunately The Warden by Daniel M. Ford. This was pitched as Necromancers meets Twin Peaks. I don't have experience with Twin Peaks, but you mentioned Necromancers and I'm pretty much immediately sold. Unfortunately, I think one of the biggest disappointments for me in this book is the way that it handles necromancers. Because if you put necromancers in the pitch, then people, myself particularly, are going to go in expecting traditional necromancers who are raising the dead, who are dealing with skeletons, and it's sort of that darker vibe. The way the magic is handled in The Warden is virtually identical to D&D, but a specific type of D&D where necromancy is also involved with healing. And that's fine if that's what you want to do, but don't sell it to me as necromancers when what you're doing is healing. Like, that's not... I want skeletons. I want creepy stuff. I don't want healing with my necromancers. So, that was one of my main gripes. My other gripe with this one is I just don't like the main character at all. I'll keep this short and sweet. I'm gonna try, because I could rant about this a lot, and I probably will later. I don't like Ailish at all. She's set up as a recent graduate of a magical university who ends up getting isolated to the far reaches of this country because basically the people in power don't like that she's a woman and a graduate. And she feels like she's set up to be this really kick-ass, smart, competent woman who ends up being undercut by those above her. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that idea, except that Ailish is just a jerk. She's very arrogant. She comes from a very privileged background. It doesn't feel like that's ever challenged. She's routinely rude to the people in the village that she's sent to, doesn't make any attempt to understand where they're coming from, but basically demands that they immediately respect her for her magical skill. And I was like, that's not how that works. They don't care about your magic. They're just trying to make sure that their sheep stay alive through this winter. And, it's just infuriating to see how often she condescends to the people in the village and then gets mad when they don't respect her. Like, that's ridiculous. You didn't make any attempt to endear yourself to them before you just start demanding things from them. Like, that's just... It drove me crazy. I couldn't stand Ailish at all. And between that and my disappointment with the necromancy element, it just really let me down. So, it's not one that I would recommend. If you're interested in the concept of it, it might be worth checking out. I will leave a more positive review of The Wardens down below in case it's something that appeals to you, but I I don't even know if I want to continue the series. I'm kind of tempted to pick up the second one when it comes out just to see if the things that I hated get better. But the amount that I didn't like Ailish makes it difficult to want to pick up anything else from this new series. And in a total reverse, question number 6 is biggest surprise, and this is a very positive surprise. So I will move on from my ranting and instead rave about a book. And that is that time I got drunk and saved a demon by Kimberly Lemming. I had several friends who really loved this series, and it wasn't that I thought I would hate it. I just didn't expect to love it as much as I did. It's such a clever take on a fantasy romance where one of the characters is not human, and is so self-aware of the tropes and sort of the fun and silliness of it. It just was so much fun. I binged this entire series in like 24 hours because I was just having such a great time with it. So not everybody's gonna love it. You definitely have to be a romance fan, but it was just such a good time, and it knew so well what it was and what it wanted to be, and I just can't wait to get more stories in this world because it's just a guaranteed good time. And I suppose I should give like a tiny synopsis for that one as well. So the basic premise for the book is that there's a cinnamon farmer who ends up accidentally saving a demon who's kind of rampaging, and ends up having to team up with him to deal with and ends up having to team up with him to basically save not only her village but the demon's world as well. So it's just a fun romp. It's not really enemies to lovers, but there's definitely a very bantery dynamic between the two main characters that was super fun. Again, it's just silly, but it knows it is, so you can just have a good time with it. Definitely one I'd recommend. It is a little on the steamy. It's definitely on the steamy side, so if that's not something you like, this may not necessarily be your cup of tea, but again, just fantastic time with that whole series. Question number 7 is a favorite new to you author, either debut or just new to you, and that one was actually pretty easy for me. And because I had several authors that I read for the first time this year that I really enjoyed, but I have already fit them into other categories and I want to be able to talk about something different. And this particular author, I now feel very comfy in saying that they're a new favorite because I have read 2 different books of his and I had such a great time with both of them. That is Sebastien de Castell. I read Traitor's Blade, which is the first book in his Greatcoat series, which is sort of a fantasy Three Musketeers, which is just super, super fun. And the main thing that I love about that one is the banter in Traitor's Blade is amazing, and he's just so... De Castell is so clearly a sword nerd. It's just remarkable. I just really enjoyed the way he talked through the fight scenes. He definitely has a fourth wall breaking, talk to the reader style that if it's kind of gonna determine whether or not you can like the story. If you don't like that, it's so present that I can't really see liking Traitor's Blade. But if you enjoy that kind of storytelling, this is just so much fun. The other one I read is the Malevolent Seven, which is sort of like a Suicide Squad with wizards, where you have the main character, Kate Umbra, has to put together a group of 7 sort of morally flexible mercenary wizards to go up against a group of these 7 greatest wizards who are trying to take down a very evil baron, and obviously the Malevolent Seven are on the Baron's side in this particular case because he's paying them. So, very cynical. It makes me think of sort of Kings of the Wild meets First Law. I just really enjoyed the humor in this. I enjoyed the cynicism of it because I really am more of a fan of a world in which things are dark, but there's also a lot of humor, even if it's gallows humor. So I really, really enjoyed that one. It has a very similar fourth wall breaking, talk to the reader type style, which I'm just coming to recognize as something that Castell does. And for me, he does that really, really well, and it always makes me enjoy it even more. So I also, this is going to be blasphemy, I think, for some of my friends who love the Greatcoat series. I like Kate Ombre substantially more than I like Falcio from Greatcoats. And it's really just because he has some of the same ambitions and wanting to be noble, but he also has been through some awful things, and he's kind of had to recognize that the world doesn't necessarily fit what he believes it should be. And he's less self-righteous than Falcio, and I enjoy his humor more. So I think you are not necessarily going to like Malevolent Seven if you like Greatcoats. They're very different tones, and there's more of what I would consider sort of dude humor, which is why I make the Kings of the Wilde comparison, because there's some dick jokes in there. There's definitely some sexual exploitation of some of the side characters, so there's more darker elements that may not be your cup of tea, even if you did really enjoy Greatcoats. I do have to say that Traitor's Blade has a very uncomfortable Traitor's Blade has several tropes that it uses that I hate. So if you go into Traitor's Blade, just go in knowing that there is fridging of one of the side characters as motivation for one of the main characters. And there is also an incredibly uncomfortable sexual healing scene that I feel like should have just been taken out of the book entirely. Those two things aside, if you enjoy sword fighting, if you enjoy banter, pick up Greatcoats. It's amazing. At this point, Castell is just an auto-buy author for me. I would read anything that he wrote. I have not tried out the Spellslinger series, which I know is his least liked series so far, at least among the people I know. So we'll see if that one is one that still ends up working for me. I think it is more in the YA camp, so it may not, but I'll definitely give it a try after how much I've loved Greatcoats. But I'll probably try and finish Greatcoats before I move to Spellslinger. Question number 8 is a controversial one, I think, but it's newest fictional crush, and I tend to just pick a romantic partner that I really like or I personally would be attracted to. And so this one is more in the realm of a romantic partner I like than necessarily someone that I would want to date. And that is Wendell Bamblebee from Emily Wilde. I'm trying not to have too many repeats in this tag, but man, I just love Wendell. He reminds me a lot of Howl from Howl's Moving Castle. If he were a little more sympathetic. Wendell is hilarious. The audiobook gives him a sort of Irish accent because he is in fact from Ireland, and he's just such a fun character. He has a lot of banter. He's one of those guys that does as little work as possible, but he also is one that kind of uses his charm and his laziness to disguise the fact that he is helping people out, even when they don't necessarily want him to. But he never really plays that up. He just pretends to be this person who doesn't give a crap about anybody else and just is really out for himself. But you do kind of see him take actions that indicate otherwise. And at the bottom of it, I love how he and Emily interact. And I love how he's needling Emily through a lot of the book. But he clearly cares about her. And their relationship matters to him. Their friendship matters to him. It's not just him trying to get in her pants. So I really, really like him as a very supportive, but also a sometimes prickly and willing to push people's boundaries in a way that's just really fun. Question number 9 is newest favorite character, and even though I just said that I would not, I would be trying not to repeat myself too much. All of these characters are from books I've already mentioned. So Mahit Dismar from the Teixcalan duology. She's smart and she's clever, and you see her use her intelligence and her observation skills to get herself out of trouble. It's not one of those where it's like they tell you she's smart, but then she does dumb stuff all the time. I loved Mahit. I really identified with how much she loved language and the way that she tried to navigate society and do her little mining station proud. She really, really appealed to me on a deep level because she's more of an, introverted isn't the right word, but she's a character who notices a lot of details and who uses that intelligence and that perceptiveness to her advantage, which, again, I really appreciated. I loved Emily Wilde, as I have talked about multiple times. Emily is very prickly. She's not good with people. As someone who has social anxiety and can be a little awkward, I really identified with Emily and her preference for basically staying inside with a good scholarly book instead of going out and socializing. So she was just very much my type of character, and I really, really enjoyed her. And then the third one that I'll mention is actually from I had forgotten about this third character, and she is from a different book that I haven't mentioned yet that was a new favorite in the first half of this year, and that's Godkiller by Hannah Kaner. I loved Kissin in that book, and Kissin is this. She reminds me, honestly, a lot of Gideon the Ninth from the Locked Tomb series. She is a godkiller. She ended up losing her family in a tragedy that was related to a god, and it has made it her life's work to hunt them. And I absolutely loved what a sasshole she is. She definitely has a lot of snarky commentary. She's an incredibly capable fighter. She's just absolutely, as far as sassy, martial arts driven characters, she's one of my faves. So definitely loved Kissin from Godkiller. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry, and this one is actually really tough this year for me. So I actually cry really easily when reading a book if I get attached to any of the characters, but mostly this year I've been reading sort of books that are happier in tone and haven't had a lot of tragedy that makes me cry. So I had a hard time coming up with a book that had actually made me cry. So the book I ended up picking is a memory called Empire, and I don't want to get into the reasons that this book made me cry because they would be spoilery, but just suffice to say, this is a book that definitely made me cry. Broke my heart a little bit, but also I still really love that book. Question 11 is a book that made you happy. So for this one, I am just going with the Mead Mishaps series by Kimberly Lemming. I loved this whole series. Like I said, binge them in 24 hours. I don't like the second one quite as much as I like the first and the third. I would probably rank them 3-1-2 as far as my enjoyment in the relationship and the characters, but they're just such a good time that I know anytime I pick up one of the Mead Mishaps series, I'm just gonna have a great time. So that's definitely a series that all of the books have made me happy. Okay, I had to run and grab them because I totally forgot to bring them up here, but the next question is so question 12 is the most beautiful book you've bought or received this year. I think all of these are books that I have bought for myself. I'm a sucker for special editions. So the first one that I'll talk about is actually a very recent book that I've gotten from Goldsboro. They have an SFF, what do they call it? I think it's just GSFF. But it's their Sci-Fi Fantasy Fellowship book, and that is Scarlet by Genevieve Cogman, and this cover is just gorgeous. It has this amazing foiling on there, and super cool end papers, so I really love the look of this one. The naked is less pretty, but I freaking adore that foiling. And the fantastic end papers. And I think this one is basically Scarlet Pimpernel, but vampires. So definitely looking forward to get to that one. Then I have a special edition of The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi. I think this one is a Fairy Loot. Is this Fairy Loot or Lumicrate? I don't remember. Fairy Loot. And they did such a great job. Again, it has this absolutely gorgeous foiling on the front and on the back here. And a cool little ship on the spine there. The end papers have this fantastic, like, tentacles and the ship. And then the naked hardcover is just as pretty. But I think honestly my favorite part is that it has these fantastic maps with Amina on the front inside flap there, and then there's a cat on the back here. So it's just fantastic. I really, really love this edition. It's probably one of my favorites that Fairy Loot has done. And then the last one I'll mention is the Illumicrate special edition of Painted Devils by Margaret Owen. Again, this is that sequel to Little Thieves. It's done in the same style where you have the original hardcover image, which is also fantastic, by the way. But then you also have art done by Margaret Owens on the inside, like printed on the actual hardcover itself. And it's just so well done. I really, really love these. Obviously, with the author illustrating it, it's going to suit the story, but I just really love the style for that. I don't remember if I showed the end papers. They're pretty cool as well. Not as cool as the naked hardcover, but pretty cool. So those are definitely, I have many fancy editions that I've gotten this year, but I think those are my 3 favorites so far. The final question, number 13, what books do you need to read by the end of this year? And I'm laughing because I have such a long list of books I need to read. So the ones I will mention are books that I need to read for buddy reads that I have fallen behind on. So all 3 of these I kind of need to apologize for not having read yet, but life just gets in the way. Sometimes that's how it goes. So Jade City by Fonda Lee. I really need to get back to that one. I just honestly stopped reading it because I loved it too much and it was cutting into my sleep. So I need to just binge read that on a weekend in the second half of the year. I want to read the 3rd book in the Thursday Murder Club, which is The Bullet That Missed. And then the 4th and I believe final book in that series is coming out, I want to say September or November of this year. So I would love to finish out that series. And then I have Fire Logic by Laurie J. Marks. My friend Jess has been pushing a group of us to read this. I think almost everybody is really enjoying this. I think everybody's really enjoying the series. I just am one of the ones who hasn't even started yet. So I want to at least get to Fire Logic, potentially the other 3 in the series, but we'll just see how much I can get done. So that is my long-winded set of answers to how the first half of my reading year has gone. If you have read any of the books I talked about, definitely let me know your opinions on them. And if you want to, and if you feel like it, pick one of the questions from this list, or all of them, and let me know what your answers would be. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!